How do you stop having negative thoughts? Several months ago, when I had my awakening, I suppose you could call it, where I came into the clear understanding and knowing that my subconscious and conscious mind are actively creating the reality that I am experiencing. One of the very first things that I sought to do was stop having negative thoughts because you attract what you think about. What you think about is a reflection of who and what you are, and who and what you are will determine what your reality, what the external world reflects back to you. Of course, the one of the core principles of manifestation is an understanding that there is no separation between you and what you perceive as the external world. It is all one. You are one with the external is one with you. What you are seeing, what you are interacting with, is merely a reflection of what's going on internally. And by internally, I mean your mind. And so it becomes painfully obvious that if you want your experience of this reality in this life to be more pleasant, then you need to have less negative thoughts. However, when I first started this this journey of or this undertaking of ceasing negative thoughts, I realized that I can't. In fact, the more energy that I put into trying to stop my negative thoughts, the more my negative thoughts would persist. Again, this is another fundamental principle in this space of manifestation. What you resist persists. Anything that you are actively thinking about, you are pouring energy into and giving more life. In this space, it is commonly said that thoughts are things. And so, when you think about the fact that you're having negative thoughts, you are actually creating, let's call it an entity or a being that thrives off of the idea that you are struggling with negative thoughts. And so the more energy you pour into this idea of I am struggling with negative thoughts, I keep having negative thoughts, I need to stop having negative thoughts, you're actually making it stronger, causing yourself to have more negative thoughts. And so, how does one stop having negative thoughts? Well, I can't give you a definitive answer for that because I still have negative thoughts. However, the frequency and the potency of the negative thoughts that I have nowadays is a fraction of what they were when I began this journey. I dare say that the grand majority of my thoughts are incredibly positive, or at least the grand majority are not negative. Maybe a good portion of them are neutral, and then the rest are positive. But very few negative thoughts arise within me, and I've been able to accomplish this within a few months, few short months. I think that is actually a testimony to how effective my techniques are. I do not have years and years and years of doing this manifestation approach. For several years prior to this, I was actually a devout Christian. I was an incredibly religious person. I did experiment with things like Buddhism prior to that, atheism, as well as the law of attraction. I did experiment with that after I read The Secret almost 10 years ago, but I got away from that. And it wasn't until a few months ago that I that this clicked, that this all clicked. It all made sense. And really, it was because I was able to draw on those various chapters of my life and finally identify certain patterns. And having strengthened certain spiritual muscles in each of these arenas, whether that be fundamentalist religion, meditation that I did heavily during my Buddhist phase, and having actually accomplished things and manifested things using the law of attraction many years ago, I was able to pinpoint certain patterns and come to the conclusion that my current understanding of reality is the most accurate understanding that I have had thus far. And for that reason, I've been seeing the most powerful results. In a very short period of time, I've been able to radically transform my life. I've been able to triple my income. My relationship with my wife has become phenomenally better. And I just make better decisions. And I keep seeing the fruits of the seeds that I am sowing now continue to be better, riper, sweeter. Okay, so how do you reduce the amount of negative thoughts that you have? Well, you need to understand there are essentially two versions of you. There is a version of you that was living life prior to the knowing that your thoughts create your reality. Maybe you've heard this in the past, maybe you've experimented with it in the past, but there is a line that is drawn the day you come to know that your thoughts are creating your reality. When you come into this knowing, this marks a point between the current you and the old you. You have to understand all of the negative thoughts that you experience now. This is these are echoes, these are waves, these are leftovers from the old you that was not living consciously of this reality, of this fact, of the power of your mind. And so you have all of these beliefs, you have all of these mental bondages and chains and thought structures from your old life prior to you understanding this. And those thoughts, which are things, are charged with energy. Now, there is a law of physics that says an object in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by another force, an opposing force. And so all of these beliefs, fears, negative internal monologues, all of these thoughts are things with an energetic charge that are still barreling forward with you. And the only way they will stop is if you stop feeding them. That is it. You must wait for the thoughts to die out. That's the only method. You cannot make yourself stop having bad thoughts. All you can do is energize good thoughts, positive thoughts, and wait out the bad thoughts to die out. Now, it can be frustrating dealing with these things because these bad thoughts are some of, if not the greatest obstacles to you manifesting your desired reality. And that being a reality, of course, which is better than your previous reality. You moving into a more positive reality, manifesting a more positive reality. Let's articulate it like that, because in my previous video, we spoke about how desire is actually a lower energetic frequency. It is a lower energetic state. It's actually below pride and anger. And so being in a state of desire is to be in a state of lack, because you're communicating with the universe that there is something that you do not have, which is why you desire it. And you desire it because you believe your life will be more fulfilled once you receive it. And so instead of using the word or the term your desired reality, let's talk about manifesting a more positive reality. And so one of the greatest obstacles you will face when it comes to accomplishing that are your negative thoughts that are following you from your past self. Now, the reason why these negative thoughts can be so dangerous and detrimental, they can have no effect on you. You can be aware of them, notice them, and they do not have to have a negative effect on you. They do not need to slow you down at all with your progression towards a more positive reality. However, they do have the potential to handicap you severely. And that occurs whenever you buy into those negative thoughts and you start to interact with them. Essentially, these thoughts have the ability to bring you back to being your old self. A lot of these negative thoughts can be the stepping stone to you, for instance, having arguments in your mind, hypotheticals, worrying about what people might think about you, worrying about what people are saying about you behind your back, worrying about all kinds of things. They create fear, which of course is one of the lowest energetic frequencies. They can create a sense of anger, sense of shame, a sense of guilt, depending on what exactly the thought is. These are all frequencies that are like pouring ice water on the positive thoughts that you are having that are moving you towards a more positive reality. And so, what do you do when one of these thoughts arise? Well, first and foremost, you must realize that your old self, you can conceptualize your old self as a person, a version of you that doesn't want to die. Now, I'm not saying that this is actually literally what's going on, but it can be a helpful piece of imagery to help you to follow along what I'm trying to communicate here. So you have an old version of you, like your alter ego, like a demonic version of yourself. And I don't even necessarily want to vilify this person. It's not a bad person. It's not an evil person. It's just the old version of you, the version of you that held to the beliefs and fears and understanding of reality that the previous you held to before you came to the understanding that you have right now. And so, this old version of you doesn't want to die. In fact, it is terrified that it is dying. It is afraid of being long forgotten. If you're a bit older, you may have actually experienced this to some degree. Maybe you can think back to, let's say you're in your late 20s or 30s at the very least. Maybe you can think back to when you were in elementary school or middle school or maybe even high school. And that version of yourself is probably someone completely different than the person you are today. That person, once upon a time, when you would think of that version of yourself, maybe it would make you cringe, maybe it would bring up some kind of negative feelings, because there was a point in time where that younger version of yourself was still energetically alive and attached to you and your consciousness. But once you put enough distance energetically and consciously, meaning you no longer perceived yourself or saw yourself as that person, and you no longer entertained the various thoughts that were attached to that version of yourself that you used to identify with. Once enough time had passed and enough space had passed, that version of yourself died. Now, you couldn't even become that person again. Like you couldn't, there is no threat of you falling into that person. You see that as a child version of you. And in fact, many of the things that used to bring you feelings of insecurity and negative feelings, when you did identify with that version of yourself, you can laugh at it now. It's almost as if you see that version of yourself as a whole different person. The problem with the negative thoughts that you're having right now that are following you from your most previous version of yourself is that there is still a part of you that identifies with that previous version of yourself. There's still a part of you that kind of feels like that version of you is you in a way that you don't see your 8-year-old self or your 12-year-old self. But just like your child self, if given enough time, and if you detach from that version of yourself for long enough, you too will see that version of yourself as dead and gone, as something you can laugh about. In a way, you might not be able to do that right now because there's still energetic momentum fueling that past version of yourself. All right, so let's try and bring the vocabulary to a more simple, less spiritually woo-woo level. So, to make things incredibly simple, anytime you have one of these negative thoughts, all you need to do is see it as a fishing hook being sent out by your old self trying to reel you back in. And every time you catch it, you catch the thought and choose not to engage with the thought, you are actually weakening that previous version of yourself. It is evaporating, it is fading away like a phantom, like a ghost. And so this perspective can actually make you not necessarily happy or excited, but you will stop seeing the occurrences of these negative thoughts as a bad thing. You start to see them as a part of the process of you actually stepping into this newer, higher frequency version of yourself. It's evidence that the old self is dying. So there's that. The first thing you need to do is recognize that these thoughts are the result of your past self trying to reel you back so that you can feed energy into him, so that you can merge completely with him and he can stay alive or she can stay alive. And every time you catch yourself having one of these negative thoughts, when you choose not to engage with it, that is, don't argue with that person. Don't get into an argument with that person in your head. So don't argue with that person in real life. I'll give you an example. Let's say that there is an old version of you that was very argumentative and you don't want to be that person anymore. And somebody from your past, somebody in your life says something to you to the effect of making you identify with that old version of yourself in some way. Because when people see you shifting frequencies, they will try to shame you, guilt you, trigger you. People don't like it when people start to change. People don't like it when people start to shift frequencies. I don't know why. It's just, it is what it is. Some people don't mind, but a lot of people do. And interestingly, I find that sometimes the people who are the most bothered by it are the people who know you the least, who care about you the least, who don't mean that much to you, and you don't mean that much to them. Doesn't matter why people do it. Point is, people will try and bait you into identifying with that old version of yourself in various ways. Sometimes just by continuing to be present in your life. So, for instance, after I deconstructed out of religion and started to shift frequencies and step into the new chapter of myself, one that understands that my mind is creating my reality, and appreciating and stepping into that power and realizing that I can have whatever kind of life I want. I can be whomever I want to be. Just I had to get to the point where there were people that I used to be friends with, people that I used to interact with in that space that I literally had to cut off completely. I don't hate them. I don't think they hate me. I don't think negative things about them. I don't even particularly think many of them think negative things about me. However, their presence serves as a bridge back to my old self. And so some of these people who, now, of course, you can't do this with people that mean a lot to you, right? Like your family, your spouse, your girlfriend, people like that. Maybe a girlfriend, depending on how serious you guys are and what this person means to you. But casual friends, acquaintances, people that you don't really have strong relationships with anyway, it's better for you to just put some distance. You don't have to make a show of it. You don't have to go and tell them, oh, I can't be your friend anymore. Stop replying to their texts. Don't answer their phone calls. Don't call them back. You're moving on with your life. No differently than how you were friends with people in high school and middle school, and distance and time has just gone past, and now you probably don't even know how to contact them. There was never a falling out. There was never a, oh, I'm done with you moment. It's just like two ships that just kept sailing away until you went over the horizon, and now they're not even there anymore. So that's an example. But sometimes you'll be triggered to engage in arguments in your mind. Anything that attempts to make you identify with the old version of yourself, the version of yourself that was disempowered, the version of yourself that you are moving beyond as a result of your understanding of the power that you hold within you to create your reality. These are things you need to be aware of. Anything that tries to bring you back to identifying with that old version of yourself. And whenever you don't engage, however that looks like, not engaging, you are weakening, diminishing your past self. And eventually, they will completely die, disappear. And all that will be left is the current you. And so you just have to trust the process. That's really it. You have to trust the process. So that's the passive side of things. For a more active exercise that you can engage in is there are various things that I have found that I can do that are really good at shifting my focus to something more positive. And that's, for one, doing activities that make you feel good. So, whatever activities bring you joy, exercising, that's something good you can do. You can meditate, you can watch comedy, watch funny shows. Essentially, you just want to move your mind from focusing on these things that can create negative emotions within you and shifting your focus to things that encourage, at the very least, neutrality, but even better if they can encourage positive feelings, laughter, joy, bliss, peace, contentment, anything like that. The big thing is you don't want to spiral down. If you can just avoid spiraling downward with one of these negative emotions, even if you engage a little bit before you catch yourself, it's a win. That's what I've noticed. Initially, I would engage and I would catch myself and I would be like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? What are you doing? This isn't real. Stop it. What are we doing? And then I would try and shift my focus to something more positive. I would remind myself that I reap what I sow. The past negative experiences that I had, I unconsciously manifested them. And so that is evidence of the power that I have within me. Now let's channel that power into creating a more positive reality, one that I can thoroughly enjoy. And then you just go about your day. And just applying that strategy has resulted in exponential development and improvement where that is concerned. Now it's to a point where it's hard to say for sure, but I think I go entire days now without having a single negative thought. Entire days, meaning I wake up in the morning and go back to sleep that night, and I don't have a single negative thought. I don't go or catch myself or just complete. When I first came into this awareness that my thoughts create my reality, I was having a negative thought maybe like every 10, 15 minutes, which explains how my life got into such a mess before where I am today. Maybe even more frequent than that. And they were strong negative thoughts. They were incredibly emotionally charged. They would create anxiety within my body. My heart rate would elevate. I would feel sometimes even anxious or nervous just thinking about these things. And it would happen all day from the moment I woke up to when I went to sleep. Just throughout the entire day, negative thoughts popping up, popping up. And that's with me understanding that my thoughts create my reality. But initially, all I tried to do, once I realized that I can't make myself stop having these thoughts, and I realized that these thoughts are echoes from my past self, and they're energetically charged, and they're not just going to disappear because I want them to, I just resolved to stop engaging with them. That was it. I wouldn't beat myself up for it or feel guilty or ashamed when I would realize I was having one of these thoughts. I would just try my best to catch them as quickly as I could. And then I would just shift my focus, try my best to shift my focus, bring my attention on something else. Just don't engage. Don't talk to that person. Don't reply to that person. Don't reply to that comment. Don't argue with that person in my head. Don't try to justify past decisions. Don't rationalize my past behaviors. Just don't engage with it. Just be like, oh, there it is. There's a bad. Oh, no. What are we doing? What are we doing? Chill out. Stop. And then focus on whatever it is that I have to get done. Go exercise. And that is how you stop having negative thoughts. Hope that helps.